Welcome to the start of a series of videos that students in my classes will be watching before they do reading time. In it, we're going to break down topics relevant to our studies and also address some misconceptions about books and reading in general. Today, we're going to look at the exposition part of the plot, or the stories that we read. Think about it. Every story has a beginning, and that beginning can absolutely make or break a story. How many times have you started reading a book and put it down after just a little while, never to pick it up again? If that hasn't happened to you much, great. You have likely been blessed by reading stories with great exposition. If you're like me, you can sometimes struggle to get through the avalanche of new information presented to you in books, and if it can't hold your interest, it is unlikely you're going to want to continue deeper into a story. Authors have a really difficult position. And that position is getting you into a story and keeping you interested, while at the same time putting pieces in place so that a story can really get going. The beginning section of a novel is called the exposition, and it attempts to bring you into the world of the story, typically through introducing three things. Those three things are characters, the setting, and conflict, or the problem presented in a story. Now, this is not easy. Many authors discuss how this can often be the most difficult part of an entire book to write, mostly because it requires finding a balance. Information must be presented without bogging down the reader with too much information. Readers don't want to feel like they have to wade through endless garbage to get to the excitement of a truly good story. However, most books do require some patience. If you aren't open to giving a book time to set the stage, your chances of enjoying anything are going to become pretty small. Most TV shows struggle with the same issues, and many take several episodes or even a whole season to really get going. Some advice. When starting a new book or series, you should attempt to give any book you start time. I encourage students who are reading realistic fiction to give a book at least an hour or two of attention before putting it down for good. For most middle grades in YA fiction, this usually amounts to just under a quarter of the book. If students are trying to read something set outside of the real world, or something with fantasy or science fiction elements, it may sometimes require a little more time. It's really difficult for an author to set up a whole new world, time period, etc., without taking a little extra time to introduce you to the setting. And while most authors of these books try to pepper in details throughout the novel, you'll still often get a ton of new things thrown at you early on. Let's take a step back for a second. We're going to make a quick analogy or comparison before diving into the individual parts of the exposition. Think of a story like you'd think of a nice meal. The exposition is sort of like a salad. You may not be a huge fan of salads, but it is something that's good for you as it prepares you for the meal ahead with something healthy. With time, you might get to where you enjoy salads, especially if you find out what types of toppings you like on it. Plus, once you finish your salad, it's time for the main course. In the plot diagram, I would consider the rising action, climax, and falling action your main course. It has multiple parts, different tastes, and contains the parts of the meal you focused on when you were looking at the menu. This is where the story truly delivers, and it dictates the experience as a whole. My favorite part is dessert. The resolution's like your dessert. Sometimes it's awesome, and it wraps up your entire meal with a delicious conclusion. Sometimes, as in the case of stories with cliffhangers, there might not really even be a true dessert or resolution. It just might continue on into the next book in the series. Now let's break apart the three main things the author has to present in the exposition. Characters are the things the story must introduce. They're the ones who the action will revolve around, and in order to appreciate them, we'll eventually need to get some background info on them. This is often established during the exposition. Now, of course, characters can be mysterious. They can be mysterious throughout most of the book, but we are going to need background on them eventually. We also need to know details like what they look like and, their relationships and things. The setting is equally important. The setting is where the story takes place and also when it takes place. The setting can be in the past, present, or future. It could be on Earth, a place like Earth, or somewhere else entirely. The setting is often dictated by the genre the book falls in. Realistic fiction will often have settings like those we find on Earth. Historical fiction may be set in the past. Fantasy or science fiction may be set in an entirely different world, or one like ours but different. And horror can often be anywhere, as long as it is a place the author can create tension or suspense. Next up would be conflict or the problem. While this may not be totally apparent until later in the story, conflict begins to come into focus early on during the exposition. There are many different types of conflict, usually denoted in studies with the phrase man versus something by people who study literature. Some examples are listed, but note that these are just some of the main examples, as conflict can be narrowed down much more and be very diverse. Commonly, we have man versus man versus self, man versus nature, and man versus machine. Is there anything else to know about the exposition? Sometimes. Authors usually spend the whole book giving details about the characters, setting, and conflict presented. These details don't suddenly just stop 100% once you reach a certain point in a novel. Keep that in mind, as it could be a little bit confusing. Just remember that the exposition is setting everything up. It's exposing us to the details that we're going to need to truly understand the story. Now, as a side note, some authors do go a little bit further and present information in other ways, including pictures throughout the book, diagrams, maps, etc. Now, this type of thing is much more common in fantasy and science fiction, and it can often be a useful addition when trying to cover a topic words can't completely show you. While an author can talk about places on a map, in this case, it really helps to see the map and see where everything is. While an author can describe a building, it really helps sometimes to see the picture. Now, that's been today's discussion on exposition. With this information, you should have a good understanding of exposition as part of the plot diagram. If you're taking notes for a class, feel free to rewind to any earlier parts of the video you need to complete your notes. Thanks for watching.